put on vibrate, whatever, all your phones and things like that. I'm pleased to be here to introduce to you FAA and the 6 test site managers that have come far and wide to be with us here and share in their success and their hopes for what's going on in the future. So if we can just sort of get that sugar charge out of us, and if everybody could just join me in welcoming them for coming right now. Thank you. Thank you all. We'll get lots of noise going, attract more folks in here, get this thing filled up. Appreciate that. Okay. I was just going to introduce myself briefly. Rich Christiansen, moderator. I am the chair of AIAA's Unmanned Systems Program Committee. And for many, many years now, going back to the 90s, the committee has supported, advocated unmanned systems, technologies, applications, missions, and of the past 5 years began to address some of the policy issues, one of which is how do we gain access to the NAS and how do we support industry and FAA the best we can through the technical sessions and any policy activities that AIAA can lend its hand to. My role on this is that about 20 years ago, as a program manager at NASA headquarters, I was able to kick off and start a UAV program at the time called the Environmental Research Aircraft and Sensor Technology Program. Of the goals, trying to reach 100,000 feet, try to enable 48 to 100-hour duration. The third goal was to not buy anything. At the time, the condition was, Rich, I don't want us to end up owning a fleet of aircraft that we're only going to use now and then. What we want to do is enable the creation of a community, an industry, that is so vibrant that they'll have excess capacity and be able to lease back those capabilities to us. So answering that question was, how do we do that? And one of the first questions that we had was, you know, how do we gain access and fly routinely so that these commercial operations can exist and that NASA can merely go rent by the hour. So that was the hardest of all the goals. We did have our first introductory discussions with our sister agency, the FAA, in those early days, and of course, you know, we're coming over talking about how we want to darken the skies with UAVs and be able to use them at our leisure. What can it take to allow them to do that? And after about the second or third meeting of trying to press for an answer, it came back, Rich, if you can prove equivalent level of safety, then we have a place to start the dialogue. And so for the rest of the program, another decade, a lot of the discussion was, how do we begin to clarify what equivalent level of safety means? And as many of you probably know and appreciate, who've been a participant in that dialogue in the past 20 years, it's straightforward in some cases, it's difficult in others, but along the way, we're making progress, okay? The first areas that we began to, of course, appreciate from what is equivalent level of safety are these unmanned, unpiloted vehicles able to detect what's around them? Can they see and avoid situations? So that was always a first step. A lot of technology has been worked on that. We clearly have a ways to go in that still. In many of the sessions that we've had in our technical platforms through these conferences, a wide variety of methodologies and technologies have come across to look at, detect, see, and avoid. Part of the challenge has been, how do we get enough real-life test data, and how do we look at it from a systems perspective, not just a cool technology hanging on the underbelly of some vehicle. How do we actually work on the issues of delegating responsibility in the regulated airspace? Again, as part of NextGen, a lot of these questions are being addressed. How does the UAS system play in that context? A lot of these are part of the grander scheme, not just looking at how do we push one system into this as a unique access, but how do we begin to integrate it into the future of next gen? Is the question that we have to understand we're focusing on. And then the rest of the things that aren't maybe so much technology oriented, but training, certification, licensing, what are the real CONOPS? Are there different CONOPS? The ILITs, data and comm, as you can imagine, are very important. If we don't have somebody there, now we've got two-way comm, two-way data systems that have to be ultra reliable and trusted as it goes along. Safety standards, human factors, and there's still the insurance community to bring into some of these discussions on liability. And of late, last couple years, a great deal of press has addressed unmanned systems issues, addressing lethality, some discussions from the administration about whether or not UAVs, UAS can target US citizens, things of that nature. And then, of course, across many states, the privacy issues have led to a lot of discussion within state legislatures and some action. And what we need to do is begin to unravel a lot of independent decisions and try to look at more of a national perspective. And in addressing that, our folks in Congress have put together a modernization, FAA Modernization and Reform Act that help support the launch of this activity. And FAA put together a request for proposals, or a SIR, to put a call out for organizations, non-federal organizations, to propose. And they did. And within 10 months, they went through that process. And I'll tell you, having been involved now with many procurement activities through government, 10 months is sweet. I mean, it'd be nice to get that done in a lot of other activities. Analyzing 25 proposals from 24 states, making the announcement on December 30. And so what we have here is a great opportunity, from what I understand from this morning, the first time that we've had all 6 participants, all 6 state awardees in one place at one time. So again, this is a good, unique activity here for AIAA to hear that, as well as our FAA sponsor and program manager. Okay, so we have a lot of folks to get to. Let me start with some of the introductions. I'll go to the map. We'll have Ro Bailey from Alaska kick things off. Then moving south, Al Palmer from University of North Dakota. Ray Young in New York, the Northeast UAS Airspace activity. Elizabeth Soltys, who's our program manager from FAA, will speak at the end. Then Rose Mooney, who was recently selected as the Virginia Mid-Atlantic Partnership from Virginia Tech. Thomas Wilczek from Nevada Group. And then Dr. Cifuentes from the island nation of Padre Island. Texas A&M University-Corpus Christi. So in that order, let us begin. We'll have questions at the end, and so start preparing them. We're also going to be quite informal as we go around. We're going to talk to you in about 10, 12-minute chunks from our seating positions. So first up is Ro Bailey, Director of the Pan-Pacific UAS Test Range Complex and Deputy Director of the Alaska Center for Unmanned Aircraft Systems Integration at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. She has been with the university since 2006 and with the Unmanned Aircraft Program since 2009. Ro is a retired Air Force Brigadier General who spent most of her career in R&D and logistics, holding 4 commands over her 29 years of service. Ro?
Thank you, Rich. And thanks to AIAA also for the opportunity to let you know a little bit about where we're going with our test sites. I have this first slide up to try and explain how the relationships work a little bit. The Alaska Center for Unmanned Aircraft Systems Integration, or ACWASI, as some people like to say it, is the organization for the entire University of Alaska. It happens to be physically located inside the Geophysical Institute at the University of Alaska Fairbanks and represents the entire university, but the state has also identified us as its representative for moving unmanned aircraft systems forward in the state. The Pan-Pacific UAS Test Range Complex is a component of ACWASI, but takes on a larger role because it includes a number of entities who are significantly outside of Alaska. Now, contrary to Rick's map there, Alaska is not an island nation. We are actually attached to the continent of North America. Most weather maps don't actually convey that message, but it happens to be true. Oregon, of course, is in the lower 48, and Hawaii is the true island state sitting out in the sea there. And you can see those corridors that are identified between us. So the three states are the principal members of the PPUTRC, and the connections that you see there give us some opportunities I'll talk about in a minute here. We have 56 other team members, and those team members range from large to small industry, elements of our various state associations like Cascade Chapter of AVSI and Medallion and a few others, and even a few outside the United States. And so the nation of Iceland is one of our partners, Tromsø in Norway is a partner, and so on. So we kind of spread widely out there. So let's take a look at the Alaska ranges. This is the set of ranges we proposed. Now you see one blank. That blank is one that was actually part of military restricted airspace, and that is being discouraged, and so we won't actually be operating there. But we are also, the little blue circles you see on there are new locations. In Alaska, the way we have traditionally worked with ACWASI is as a deployment operation, typically working out of Fairbanks and deploying out to where we did missions of various sorts. So similarly with the test site, we expect that a number of our operations will take place at locations where we will do operations more than once, but we won't have permanent presence there for the most part. Poker has permanent presence, Kodiak may well. We're still making some determinations on that. Well, before I go to Oregon, some of the things that Alaska brings, of course, is wide open airspace, a rather significant amount of it that's relatively unpopulated. We have only about 700,000 people in the entire state. If you think in terms of population density, the equivalent population density in Manhattan would be 2.4 people. And that's not very many, obviously. So that means we can do an awful lot of work in an awful lot of places without much risk of encountering people or infrastructure that could be put at risk. We also have a history of working in pioneering aspects of aviation and using aerospace in innovative ways. And so from our perspective and from our state's perspective, that makes us a natural for this. And of course, we offer a fair amount of wild and rather extreme conditions, both in the form of terrain and in terms of weather. So moving on then to Oregon, these are the ranges that we proposed for Oregon. Once again, the blank is one that was military restricted airspace and so is not being pursued. Tillamook on the coast is a small, uncontrolled public airport, and it's being operated by Nearspace Corporation, so there's a private corporation operating that one. Warm Springs is the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, and the actual shape of that range is the perimeter of the reservation. And the Pendleton Range, the center of that is the Pendleton Public Airport. So the point here is in advancing the cause of integration of unmanned aircraft in the national airspace system, we offer examples in our ranges of the different kinds of integration challenges we'll have, the procedures and policies and so forth. What Oregon offers to us, aside from what I've already suggested, they've got a very strong UAS industry there. They have university research that has linked up well with the University of Alaska over the years. They have military units employing unmanned aircraft systems there, as we do in Alaska also. And they also bring us high desert and a similar but slightly different maritime environment. They're also one of the access points for the high altitude, high speed corridors that we can operate between Alaska or Oregon and Hawaii. Again, one of the areas that the FAA was looking to do. The Hawaii ranges you see are all blank because they were all military spaces, and so the approval or the likely approval here is for the high-speed, high-altitude test corridor from one island to the next. But unfortunately, at this point, we don't have a place to launch or recover that. So we'll be working on those issues once they're ready to take those next few steps. And what they bring us, of course, is another variety of remoteness, a great deal of access to the maritime environment, and they've had a strong relationship with Alaska and between our universities as well. Together, we offer almost all the climate and terrain options available in the United States. What we don't have, of course, is high-density population anywhere, but Hawaii is probably the closest in Honolulu. We also bring a fair amount of experience from the Alaska side. We've had over 90 COAs. We've got 19 active COAs at the moment, and a number that are pending and even more in draft right now. We've got a broad research experience with unmanned aircraft systems, both in the US and globally. And we've had diverse sponsors, clients, and systems. We are agnostic about our sponsors. We're agnostic about the aircraft we fly. We've got 9 different systems at the moment, and we operate others besides the ones we own. So we look for the right kind of solutions for the problem, which also gives us a lot of a different experience of the challenges you see with different types of procedures embodied in those systems. With regard to the test site operation, we were declared operational on the 5th of May, Cinco de Mayo, from the Mexican perspective, and had our first flight that same day. And we actually had our first 4 flights that day. We did our 5-minute flight for the cameras, and then we went and did the real research right afterwards. What was interesting about that is that was the first COA we had ever requested that was inside Class D airspace. It was within 3 miles of Fairbanks International. We are operating directly under the departure route from the airport, and in fact, while we were flying, our scout, between 160 and 200 feet above ground, Alaska Airlines was taking off over our heads, but they were at about 2,200 feet, so there was truly no risk. But the point was, we could ask for and receive approval to do that kind of operation as we seek how do we interact with air traffic control and how do we work the procedures for communications and for safety, all meant to step us toward that eventual ability to fly freely and commercially in this country. Our other recent operations, we did fire operation with a wildfire down in the Kenai, 200,000 acre fire. We flew at night, and you have to realize flying at night in Alaska doesn't mean dark. It doesn't get dark in the summertime there. What we were doing was mapping the hot spots, turning them over to the Interagency Dispatch Center, and here's where technology is really moving along. They would load it up to their site, and the fire teams would download it to their telephones, their cell phones, and go find the hot spots. And so end to end, we could provide information that was immediate use in protecting life and, in that case, infrastructure as well. So a lot of interesting things we're doing. Our future will involve both doing our classic research work that's university style or other proponent style research, but also doing the kind of work that clients who are looking to test their systems will do. Both offer the opportunity for learning. Both offer the opportunity to test procedures and policies. Both can feed the data that the FAA needs in order to move us forward. So we've got a lot of interesting things going on, more to come. This is a short presentation, so I'm going to hand it off to Al at this point, and look forward to your questions later.
How's the next one come up?
Next one, number 3.
There we go. I just started. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about something near and dear to my heart, and that's unmanned aircraft systems in North Dakota. You can never put enough pictures of airplanes in slides. I was at breakfast this morning with Vince from Langley, and we were talking about the revolutionary change of unmanned aircraft. And he said it's kind of like what jet engines did to manned aircraft. It greatly improved the way that we move around the globe. I put the new Kitty Hawk up here because I truly believe that we're in for a revolutionary change. Whether it's delivering packages via UAS, Amazon.com, or Google, or FedEx, or UPS, or any other unique way of using unmanned aircraft. We were fortunate to be selected in North Dakota as one of the 6 test sites. Of course, that designation was on December 30th, and we flew the same day. I don't know if we flew ahead or behind you, but we did fly on the same day. The Department of Commerce was the applicant for our application to become a test site. Our team members of the University of North Dakota State University, the State Office of the Adjutant General, and Department of Commerce, or pardon me, Department of Aeronautics. Aeronautics brings with us the commercial and general aviation element. I remember that we were briefing the acting administrator, and we were talking about our proposal, and he said, well, what's general aviation think about unmanned aircraft in North Dakota? And I said, I don't know, why don't you ask him? And Bob Simmers got up and talked about how general aviation was embracing unmanned aircraft as an opportunity to grow the aviation industry in North Dakota. We stood up a council, an authority. The governor signed an executive order. The chairman of that is the lieutenant governor. We have the members of our team are kind of like the board of directors. Along with those team members are also Bob Simmers from General Aviation, of course, and Aeronautics. We hired Bob Becklin. He was going to be sitting in this chair and couldn't make it today, so I got to sign the task to come here. He was hired almost a year ago, June of last year, to stand up the organization. We were fairly fortunate that the state of North Dakota could fund the activity. They funded the writing the proposal. They obligated $1 million to actually stand up the test site, and they've committed $2 million a year to operate the test site. So the state of North Dakota, our congressional delegation, are totally behind our test site activities. We always like to say that the lieutenant governor has drank the Kool-Aid. He's our best advocate out there for us. Some of the things that we're doing, North Dakota State University is known for their precision agricultural research. They're also known for their nanotechnology and engineering expertise. We're working with NDSU on a research program at Carrington, taking a look at 2 things. One, the various crops that they grow at the test site, and also some animal research with using UAS. It's interesting that you can use a UAS to sense the temperature of animals, and that temperature can be used either to predict whether they're sick or not, or whether they're ready to be bred. It's an interesting concept. We're using 2 aircraft, a small Dragonflyer, and we're just introducing the Trimble here as soon as our COA is approved. Another area that we're working on with the University of North Dakota is in wildlife management. We're taking a look and seeing how we can better manage our wildlife, and it's a team made of aviation, computer science, engineering, and biology. We're also working with Lake Region State College. They're not a team member, but they're part of the Center for Excellence for Unmanned Aircraft at the University of North Dakota. And they've started a program. It's just started up last year, but they train young farmers and prepare them to go out and be productive and efficient farmers, and they're using unmanned aircraft as a tool in their training program. You know, agriculture is a big deal in North Dakota. Up until last month, it was the largest single money-making operation in North Dakota. Just last month, it was taken over by the oil and gas and energy industry. The challenge, Elizabeth, we're looking really hard at figuring out how we can integrate UAS into the NASA and figuring out how these young farmers can learn how to effectively use an unmanned aircraft system to make farming more effective. You know, you guys read the news as well as I do. There's 7 billion people in the world. 2050, there'll be 9 billion. But the amount of food that we have to produce is going to double. And the question is, how are we going to do that? Unmanned aircraft may be an effective tool there. We're also working with other states. We named our test site not North Dakota, but the Northern Plains, because we assumed that we were going to partner with other states in the area. Northland Community College is a two-year school in Minnesota, and they started the first maintenance training program for unmanned aircraft systems, and they've just recently got into geospatial intelligence program to train young men and young women in the UAS field. When we first talked to our Governor Hoeven at that time about partnering with Minnesota, and he said, and we're separated by the Red River, he says, well, let's figure out how to build a bridge across the river and not a wall. And that was back in 2010. You know, some of the opportunities that we see, North Dakota has 4 climates there, row. You know, some of them are a little shorter than others, but it's a great opportunity to come and fly. We're leveraging the University of North Dakota's aviation experience, and we joke we fly about 120,000 flight hours a year with 130-some airplanes, and people say, well, what do you do in the wintertime up there? And we fly. About the only thing changes is the speed of the pre-flight. Other than that, everything else is the same. We've got lots of airspace. We've got a little bit more denser population than you. We've got 733,000 people in the state, the largest ever, by the way. We want to attract people to come to North Dakota. We have the Grand Forks Air Force Base, and we have a unique enhanced use lease there. We are developing a 225-acre industrial park solely based on UAS operations, and it hasn't been signed yet, but we think Northrop Grumman will be the first company to be the anchor customer there. We want to develop commercial operations. There's a burgeoning market out there for unmanned aircraft, whether it's an agricultural, film industry, real estate, lots of opportunity for growth. And we just have to figure out how we can do that safely and efficiently, and of course do no harm to our existing aviation program. You know, Nowhere But North Dakota. That's the title of the book published by Dr. Dean Smith. He's the dean of the college, but if you take a look at why North Dakota, we used to say that North Dakota had all the pieces of the puzzle: airspace, low population density, all 4 seasons. We have a unique base there, Grand Forks Air Force Base. It's a home to a family of unmanned aircraft systems: the Global Hawk, the MQ-9 for Customs and Border Protection, MQ-1 for the North Dakota Air National Guard, and UND has a training center there for training unmanned aircraft systems. We have a great support. The FAA has just been fantastic, Elizabeth, in helping us you know, achieve those desired goals. So we get a lot of support from the FAA, a lot of support from General Aviation. North Dakota Aeronautics Council has, again, as we say, drank the Kool-Aid and support UAS operations. We have the two research organizations, the University of North Dakota State University. We have a couple of two-year schools in Northland and Lake Region State Colleges. And we have a large collegiate aviation training program dated back to 1968. You know, this was last week. I put this in here and people go, oh yeah. But, well, anyway, you know, they say that if summer falls on a Saturday in North Dakota, we have a picnic. This occurred on October 1st of 2000. Within the next day we were flying, we flew 10,000 hours that month. So you get a little bit of snow, but it goes away quickly. And if you look at the clear blue sky, that's what it looks like 75% of the time. So thank you for your attention. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Al, let me apologize and get things straight. I'm sitting here in such anticipation, I forgot my role.
All right.
Let me introduce you to Al Palmer.
That's me.
He's the director of the University of North Dakota Center for UAS Research, Education, and Test. Palmer spent more than 30 years at the University of North Dakota John D. Odegard School of Aerospace Sciences, ultimately as director of flight operations before returning from retirement to direct the university's UAS program. He began his aviation career with the U.S. Air Force and continued with the North Dakota Air National Guard. He served as Logistics and Support Group Commander, retiring as Chief of Staff with the rank of Brigadier General. Thank you.
Hey, thanks.
Okay, so now let me get back in sync, and we'll introduce you to Ray Young. Ray is the Technical Director of the Northeast UAS, I lost track of the acronym, NUAIR?
Aerospace Integration Research Alliance.
I needed to spell that out. Teamed with Griffiss International Airport, the FAA UAS test site for New York and Massachusetts. Ray was most recently director of the Saab Census Reston Technology Center, supporting NASA and FAA projects that included R&D for safe integration of advanced aircraft, including unmanned aircraft, into the next-gen civil aviation system. Earlier, he served in the U.S. Department of Transportation as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and International Affairs. He was awarded the DOT Outstanding Achievement Award for his contributions to the department's aviation policies. Ray is a member of RTCA Special Committee 228, and he's an AIAA Associate Fellow. Ray?
Thank you, Rich, and thank you to AIAA for the opportunity to be here on this distinguished panel. I'm going to just give you a brief presentation on what Griffiss is about. I decided to start with this slide, which shows large UAS, because when we started back in 2012, we took a look 3 to 5 years ahead and looked very closely at what the FAA was doing and saying in terms of UAS integration into the NAS, and basically decided where we wanted to be. So where we came out is that we would gradually develop a capability to support IFR capable aircraft, unmanned aircraft, transiting between Class D tower controlled airspace on up into Class A airspace. And we basically, about a month after the FAA Reauthorization Act, or FMRA as we know it, was passed in February of 2012, the FAA announced that they would be holding they would be selecting the 6 test sites. This is what they adopted as their goals in the original Federal Register notice, basically saying across all the test sites, the FAA wanted to explore conventional takeoff and landing capability, high speed, greater than 250 knots indicated, maritime, launch and recovery, operations at extremely high altitudes above Class A airspace or 60,000 feet, and evaluating dissimilar aircraft operating at multiple altitudes in non-segregated airspace. So that was the original thinking of the FAA. Between March of 2012 and the February of 2013, when basically the RFP was released, except the FAA called it a screening information request, given that it was not a contract and that the vehicle between the test sites and the FAA would be an other transactions agreement. The things changed a little bit. I think the significant activity was the transition from the RTCA Special Committee 203, which my colleague Rose Mooney co-chaired, to a new Special Committee 228, which would focus on IFR-capable aircraft transiting between Class D airspace and Class A airspace. Particularly, the two really difficult challenges for UAS integration, which are detect and avoid and control of communications. So that really started to happen in about December of 2012. The test site SIR was released in February of 2013, and these were the FAA's priorities. That, first of all, system safety and data gathering. Basically, that's what the Congress set up the test sites to do, to gather the data to help inform the FAA's regulation of this new activity as it evolved into and was integrated into the NAS. So that certification, command and control link, mirroring SC-228, control station layout and certification, ground and airborne detect and avoid technologies, and UAS environmental impacts. As the SIR was released, and it involved, as most of you know, privacy got added to the list. So Griffiss International Airport is an airport owned and operated by Oneida County, New York. As many of you know, the FAA required all the test sites to be public entities for several reasons, and the main reason being that only public entities could hold COAs, and that the aircraft operated in the test ranges would need to be public aircraft. So NUAIR, who I represent, had basically, we're a consortium of about 40 members and about 25 different academic institutions in New York and Massachusetts. And we had come up with an approach to responding to the SIR. Then towards the end of the time that, or right after the SIR was released, we discovered that the FAA would require the applicants to be public entities. Fortunately, Oneida County, New York was one of our team members, so we went to them and asked if they would become the applicant and the test site operator, and they agreed. So NUAIR is a non-profit organization, as I said, a consortium of over 40 members, and we are teamed with Griffiss. Griffiss is the test site operator in terms of the formal contract with the FAA under the OTA. NUAIR is a test site manager teamed with Griffiss. Griffiss There was former Griffiss Air Force Base. The main runway there is 12,000 feet long, 200 feet wide, and has contract tower, so it represents Class D airspace. It was decommissioned under BRAC in 1995 and taken over by the county as the county airport after that. And we're extremely fortunate to have Griffiss as our main test range. And like, as Roe Bailey said, in Alaska, we've had discussions with the tower at Griffiss and with the FAA about doing operations in Class D airspace. And I'll show you our test ranges, proposed test ranges, in a minute. You'll see how that fits. New York and Massachusetts. The New York airspace is east of Lake Ontario, the northern part of the state, up into the Adirondacks to the Canadian border. This is what we proposed to the FAA. Of course, we won't be operating in all of that area, particularly since there is some military restricted airspace at Fort Drum, which I'll show you in a minute. The second proposed test ranges are at Joint Base Cape Cod, which represents the Massachusetts military reservation, and that gives us our oceanic capability. So concluding with this slide, which shows the circle is the Class D airspace. We call it GSSD, GSS being the old three-letter designator for Griffiss Air Force Base. Today it's RME for Rome, New York. GSS1 is an area to the north of that, and then GSS2 extends up even further to the north. As we develop specific plans and specific aircraft to fly in these test ranges, we'll propose COAs to the FAA, and we would expect to be able, that the COAs could extend up to 18,000 feet, which would be necessary to get aircraft up into Class A airspace. To the west, the lower left, is Syracuse, New York, which is Class C airspace, and up to the north on the center part of this VFR chart is Fort Drum, New York. And the reason I mention Syracuse and Fort Drum is that the Air National Guard in New York operates MQ-9 Reapers today, the 174th Wing, out of Fort Drum. For many years they've operated, many years being at least 30 years, they've operated out of Syracuse Hancock Airport, but they have, after they converted from F-16s to MQ-9s, they had to move their launch and recovery element up to Fort Drum, which is 60 miles to the New York. Currently, the 174th is working with the FAA to develop a COA at Syracuse Hancock and conduct operations in Class C airspace, which, to my mind, is a major move forward for the Air National Guard, the FAA, and for the progress towards safe integration of UAS into civil airspace. Customs and Border Protection operates there, Predator Bs along the northern border, and the Air Route Traffic Control Centers at both Boston and Cleveland are very familiar with UAS operations in Class A airspace. Next year, the United States Army will equip the 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum with the Army's Gray Eagle MQ-1Cs, so we'll have additional operations in this airspace. That concludes a brief presentation, and I'll turn it back to our moderator.
Thanks. Thanks, Ray. Okay. Next is Rose Mooney, going down the coast, New York to Virginia. Rose is currently the Executive Director for the Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership M-A-A-P. I guess you say that's MAP.
MAP.
Okay. Which is operated from Virginia Tech. Prior to this, she served as Vice President of Archangel Aero LLC, an engineering consulting company that serves the new technology and aviation arenas. Prior to Archangel, she spent the last 7 years as the Director of Engineering and then Director of UAS Aerospace Integration for AA Textron Systems, AAI Textron Systems. There, she developed and managed flight test sites, pilots, integration labs, systems tests, design, and specialty engineering. Rose served as the president of the UAS National Industry Team, UNITE, was the co-chair of RTCA SC-203 Unmanned Aircraft Systems Committee, AIA UAS Subcommittee, and sat on NASA's Advisory Committee on UAS. Rose?
Well, thank you very much for having us here today, and I'm going to change the flavor of this a little bit. I really am honored that we were one of the sites that caught the car, shall we say. Many people chased it, and we have gone out and caught it. So now we have to figure out what's next and what we do with it. So I'm going to just briefly talk about what's next and a little bit about the research portion of the integration real quickly, and then we really want to get to your questions after our panel. So we are 3 states, and if you take a look at the locations there, we are Virginia, New Jersey, and Maryland. And those 3 states are not in the middle of nowhere. We probably have a population density that in about 5 square miles that could beat North Dakota in many areas, and we're very close to Washington, D.C., so take that for whatever that's worth. You know, what we plan on doing is early flight tests to occur in multiple areas that are designed to manage risk and to further the airspace research. And the FAA had stated for all of the test sites that there were 4 major areas of research, and that was UAS readiness, human systems integration, airspace operations, and communications, and that will look different ways to different peoples, different people. So the universities have, through years, and also industry have been doing different types of research, from basic research on sensors to more advanced research, and also integration research, which is a different level, which is really what's going to be furthering us along with the other research into the airspace integration. So we want to demonstrate performance, and our testing and research will gradually increase in complexity, both in size of aircraft and in performance. And we're going to focus our site development, our launch and recovery sites, by figuring out where the best places are for the research, by 1 and 2 in each state, and then expanding that integration from there, working with the FAA. So the airspace development, we really feel, is going to be in areas initially for commercial applications in agriculture and utility, emergency response. We certainly have a lot of options with proximity to R&D centers, both DOD, NASA, and FAA, and then we also are going to leverage commercial use opportunities and help use commercial platforms to help further that research for the FAA. I think one of the other important next steps is that the test sites we all feel it's important, although we have different airspace and we want you all to come fly there. The real importance here is to get the U.S. access to airspace commercially and further access with UAS for DOD and for research. So we're all very excited to be here. I'm not going to go further with this so that we can move along and get to your questions, but thank you very much. And those are my airspaces, but you can see those. If you want more details, you can ask.
All right. Thanks, Rose. Again, moving south, but further to the west, is our Nevada site. Tom Wilczek is the Defense and Aerospace Liaison for the Nevada Governor's Office of Economic Development. He possesses greater than 25 years of experience in defense, aerospace, and environmental law and policy development. He managed numerous mission-critical programs for the U.S. Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Defense, National Nuclear Security Administration, and regional governments throughout the western U.S. He is Nevada's lead point of contact for the advancement of unmanned systems industry development.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Richard. I really appreciate that. And I do want to, before I talk specific about Nevada, I'd just like to follow on with Rose and your particular comments about, you know, how I think, specifically how Nevada, and I think maybe the greater thought about the test sites. I mean, we've all the reps here, we've all gotten together many times, although never in a public forum like here, where we've talked about our, the necessity to work together and to collaborate, and how we really feel that we need to support the FAA in its important mission, which is to assist with the integration of unmanned systems into the national airspace. We're very mindful, you know, of the heavy lift that, you know, that's been placed on the FAA, and we're all very assistive and supportive of Liz and Jim Williams and their efforts to move forward. Interestingly, we also look at ourselves and say we all bring something different to the table. And in our independence and in our uniqueness, there is strength, because we don't overlap that much. So you've heard about 4 of the sites, their uniqueness, and then so let me just segue into Nevada specifically and what we think we bring to the table. Interestingly, being in Nevada and living in Nevada for 25 years, we've always looked at ourselves as one of our pedigrees is our ability to test and to be kind of the test construct for the nation. And when I say that, I'll talk about it in 2 terms, in terms of Department of Defense and Department of Energy. I mean, you've all seen those grainy black and white photos, right, of the, you know, the nuclear, you know, explosions going off in the desert somewhere. And I've actually had the fortune to, you know, to work in that environment. Again, working out at the Nevada test site for a period of time, and then also transiting over and supporting Department of Defense. So you've got DOE and the Nevada test site, and then for DOD, you've got Naval Air Station Fallon, which is a home of the Navy's largest continental-based training range. You've got Nellis Air Force Base and the Nellis Test and Training Range, and then Creech Air Force Base, which, you know, is very robust in terms of the Air Force's support with unmanned systems. So 3 years ago, industry actually came to our governor, Governor Brian Sandoval, and basically alerted him to the fact that FAA and Congress was going to moving in this direction, and asked for the governor's support. And of course the governor, you know, wholeheartedly agreed and said yes. And then no more than 24 hours later, that transited over to me, which was now make it happen. And you know, so all of you know, it took, you know, 2.5 years from the time the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2012 came out to where we are now. So what we did to play on our uniqueness and what we thought we brought to the table is that in terms of the number of sites, we actually offer up 4. And in no apparent order, transiting from north to south is Stead Airfield, which is located about 5 miles north of Reno. For those of you, especially here, since you're all aviation-centric or aerospace-centric, you're aware that Stead is home of the National Championship Air Races. And that's an excellent site in terms of, and again, you know, low population density, you know, all the other reasons why our other sites, you know, have basically said why we're excellent places to test these systems. Transiting a little bit more farther south, you've heard me talk about a Naval Air Station Fallon. We actually, our second site is located, it's called Fallon Municipal, right outside the restricted airspace within Naval Air Station Fallon. And then moving down south towards the Las Vegas area, Boulder City Municipal. And then the 4th site is a really unique aviation asset called Desert Rock Airstrip, which actually exists within the boundaries of the National Nuclear Security Site. So it's an airstrip, it's very robust. However, it's not a general use airstrip at all. It's under the auspices of the DOE. Interestingly, once we received our designation, we were contacted by at least 40 additional sites and regional and local airports in Nevada, all asking to be part of what we put together. So ostensibly, and one of the things when you talk about the state of Nevada, we look at the state as our test site. And it's just a matter of vetting and looking at all the excellent opportunities and assets that we have in the state that are available to offer up to, you know, any interested parties wanting to test and you know, wanting to vet their systems. We're also I think we're well funded. Prior to December 30th of last year, our governor and our legislature approved a budget of $1 million to help stand up our efforts, with a promise that if we got the test site designation, they would fund an additional $4 million. So frankly, we have, we started off with about $5 million. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate the approval, because that got us another $4 million from our state legislature. Some of the other interesting parts I'll just go over real quick. We've got 28 team members here in Nevada. Lockheed Martin Skunk Works is one of our original team members, as well as a company called Sierra Nevada Corporation. Those of you, especially from NASA, understand where Sierra Nevada Corporation is coming from. And then one other entity is also called Arcata Associates. And again, those of you from NASA understand Arcata Associates and the pedigree they bring with NASA range management. About a year ago, we were also fortunate that I had the opportunity to meet with my counterpart from the province of Alberta, Canada. And Alberta is also very robust in the development of manned systems from the Canadian perspective. And it was one of those things where we just got together and started talking, and it took about 6 months to get it together, but we signed a memorandum of understanding with the province. So a state-to-province MOU, where we basically are doing technology transfer and working on our collaborative R&D projects cross-border. And so that's always an opportunity we have out there that Albertans can look to us for some technology transfer and some university collaborations. One of the things we did with that $1 million that you heard me talk about, which was pre-SIR application, is we spent it. And we spent it prior to December 30th. And if you're going to say, what could you do with $1 million? Well, I know what we all could do with $1 million. But what we did in Nevada is we put together a team. We formed the Nevada Institute of Autonomous Systems. And we built a master documents library. It's comprised of 15 volumes with 195 separate sections that basically talk about all the different procedures that we feel, and this was even prior to the December 30th announcement, that we feel would be necessary to allow us to fly. And so when you say, well, what type of processes or what type of documents would you be looking for? It would be anywhere from spectrum management, quality assurance, health and safety, a litany of all the different types of processes and procedures that we feel would be necessary to put in place. And that was completed on about December 15th. So we have basically this huge master document library. And we did that because we thought even if we didn't get the designation, we know that we're basically going to have this library out there for processes and procedures that would allow us in time, once airspace started to get integrated, that we would have the opportunity to move forward and put those in play. Just lastly, I'll also talk about our university system. I'll let you know that in response to what happened 2.5 years ago with industry coming to the governor, that our two major institutions, which is University of Nevada, Las Vegas, or UNLV, and then University of Nevada, Reno, both started minor programs for unmanned systems. Both are in their respective College of Engineering, and both are very aggressive in terms of standing these programs up, and they're both currently stood up, and they already have students in them, and they're robustly supporting our mission as well. I appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about Nevada, and I know that there's another site up there, so I'll pass it over to Luis.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Okay, moving on down, we have Dr. Luis Cifuentes. He is Vice President for Research, Education, and Outreach for Texas A&M University at Corpus Christi. In addition, he is a professor in the Department of Physical and Environmental Sciences. Dr. Cifuentes began his career with Texas A&M University in 1988 as an assistant professor of oceanography and proceeded through the ranks to full professor. Beginning in 2004, he served as Executive Associate Dean and Associate Dean for Research in the College of Geosciences, and for a time assumed the position of Interim Vice Provost of the university. Please.
Thank you, Rich. I've had a lot of long titles in my career, and some of you may be wondering why Texas A&M University-Corpus Christi. We kind of joke that sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, and that is that at one point in 2011, somebody came to us, somebody who's involved with the FAA, but who's also a former student of A&M, which is known as an Aggie, and said, is Texas going to make a submission? And at that point, we knew absolutely nothing about this. And we said, we don't know. And the answer was, well, you have got tremendous airspace, and you ought to be involved. And that's how we got into this. And one of the things that we ultimately are going to write about, as me being an academic, is the relationship that has taken place between our university and Camber Corporation, which is our industrial partner and now our lead systems integrator. What transpired between those two extremely different cultures ultimately led to the success that we think we have right now, and that success is going to help us in the future, as it is very clear to us as academicians that the sustainability of these test sites is at some level dependent on universities being able to work with industry nimbly and without all of the obstacles that typically tend to happen in universities when they do R&D contracts. So that's a separate story in and of itself. So let me tell you a little bit about our test site. Texas, as you know, is a very large state, and we have tremendous geographical diversity. We have tremendous climatic diversity. So as you see the different test ranges, you'll see that people can fly in a variety of different conditions within the same state. Now, the distance between those test sites may be as large as the distance between our colleagues here, but it is all within the state, and it is all connected to a central command and control unit, which I will talk a little bit about later. So one of our strengths is the academic group that we have put together, and the way we did this is we brought folks to Austin under the auspices of the Office of the Governor, and we conducted a workshop and basically identified individuals and or universities that could provide research in the areas that the FAA was interested. So we have the Texas Engineering Experiment Station, which is one of the largest state agencies involved in engineering and has a great reputation with its universities and aerospace. We have UT, we have UT San Antonio, we have UT Arlington, we have the Southwest Research Institute, we have our own university. So from the perspective of being able to provide the R&D support that is required for this program, we have put together a strong internal team. But the other part of this is we are setting ourselves up to be able to work with anyone, anywhere, who is interested in developing R&D, testing, and evaluation. And we're setting up what we think of as a one-stop shop where any university in the country that particularly wants to take advantage of our ranges and the geographic and climatic diversity that they provide can work with the test site and take advantage of that. So right now we have essentially 11 ranges across most of South Texas, although it does go up into the area of Fort Hood and College Station, which is over to the far upper right of that graph. 3 of these COAs have been active for a while, 2 in College Station, 1 in South Texas on Padre Island. One of them is going to be out in West Texas. That's at an altitude of about 5,000 feet and close to Big Bend National Park. And that's where we plan to have flights up to 18,000 feet. The one you see in the middle, heading out towards the Gulf of Mexico, is an area where you can fly out of an airfield in Beeville, Texas, and go through that COA and get into the Gulf of Mexico. South of Corpus Christi, we have a series of COAs that extend all the way from the Gulf of Mexico inland. So we can look at maritime areas, we can look at coastal resiliency issues, and then we can move inland and deal with rangeland and precision farming issues. Up in College Station, 2 old established areas that have been utilizing COAs for a while. One of them is Disaster City, if any of you know. It's a city that's been made essentially to test and develop disaster relief mitigation and response issues. And then we have next to that a Riverside range where Texas A&M Engineering Experiment Station is developing their Canvas program, which is a center for autonomous vehicles and sensor systems, where sensor systems for UAVs can be tested and then either tested on that range or taken down to any of the other ranges, depending on what kind of conditions they were looking for. So that allows a variety of different UAV research, development, testing, and evaluation applications, depending on what it is that you're looking for. When people talk about the future, one of the things that we're extremely excited about is the opportunity for economic development, particularly in the area of South Texas. And there's a really interesting thing happening there. You've got our test site in Corpus. You have all of the activity that's going on in a very large city of San Antonio, which is one of the largest growing cities in America. You have the border, where a lot of the homeland security technology is going to be developed and the utilization of UAVs will be used in that environment. And then in Brownsville, you've got the whole SpaceX program. So within that region, inside of that region, you have the Eagle Ford Shale, which is going to create oil and gas development for the next decade. So you have economic development and you have all of this exciting things going on, and we are already seeing this filtering down into the high schools and the elementary schools. And we firmly believe that this, and you said it was a Kitty Hawk moment. I think it's a moment that actually may have a real impact on STEM education and development. And so while that's not exactly the integration into the national airspace, I think the workforce issue is one that will create itself because of the excitement that's being generated by the program. So one of the things that we feel very strongly about, we've been talking about this with our colleagues, is the fact that as silos, we're not going to be able to generate the solutions that need to be generated in the time period. So one of the key challenges for the future is for all of the test sites to work together on issues of data management and data sharing, and then technology sharing, best practice sharing. And so one of the things that I think every one of us here really believes in strongly, and we have the great support of the FAA, is that we cannot be seen as individual test sites. We have to be seen as a collective whole. There are many things that we can provide in Texas, but we cannot provide certain weather conditions that are up in Alaska and North Dakota and vice versa. And we don't have, in some areas, the kind of populations that you have in New York and Virginia. So when you put them all together, the opportunities are incredible. And that's one of the main messages about the future from my perspective. So I'll turn it over to the boss.
Very good. Thanks, Luis. Okay, Elizabeth Soltys is a FAA veteran who began her federal career designing air traffic control facilities to house research and full-scale development systems. She has represented FAA in managing interagency agreements with NASA and the Department of Defense in order to coordinate cross-agency research portfolios. She managed a shared situational awareness initiative to advance net centricity, then resident within the Joint Program and Development Office. She was recently program manager for FAA's SE 2020 program, which supports research and systems engineering tasks for FAA's next-gen development projects.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting us to speak today. So today we're supposed to be talking about the future, but I've heard a few little things here today that I think we need to talk about the past and how we got here. So let me just go back to February 14th, 2012, when the FAA Modernization and Reform Act became law. And at that time, the agency was asked to select 6 test sites. And Tom, although I appreciate you saying that I selected your site, it was actually the Honorable Michael Huerta, who's my boss, who selected the site, so I can't take credit. But at that time, we did, in fact, hold a public webinar to talk about where we were heading with these 6 test sites. And a year later, we released our solicitation. And I know we've heard the word SIR today and RFP, and I'd like to provide a little bit of insight there. All agencies, other than the FAA, reside under the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulations. The FAA has a unique acquisition system called the Acquisition Management System. And instead of putting out requests for proposal, we had to change the language just a wee bit. So we put out screening information requests. So you've heard this term SIR many times today, and you've probably heard RFP, and I just wanted to provide that little nuance that the FAA is different. So we did, in fact, release a screening information request 1 year after the date of enactment of this law to look at the selection of the 6 test sites. And so here's a little bit of information. We received 30,000 pages in proposal submissions, which is quite an undertaking. And I know you saw airspaces today and depictions of airspaces that will be used, won't be used, and also some of the pictures demonstrated, not to pick on you, about half the state of Texas, the shaded area. For anybody with an airspace background, know that we, the agency, have not turned on half the state of Texas to conduct operations. It's a pretty picture. So we are looking forward to that in the future. We are, aren't we? So aside from selecting the 6 test sites, after we select the test sites, which happened December 30th in 2013, this last year, 180 days later, we need to have a project stood up. And here are those 6 test sites, a pretty picture of them. And of course, Alaska isn't where it's shown here. But by looking at this picture, you see that we met the mandate of the law. And the mandate required us to have geographic diversity, climate diversity, and not just climate diversity within the team of Alaska, but across the portfolio that was selected. Research diversity, as well as meeting ground-based infrastructure needs. Another little tidbit that's of interest is that there were 25 applicants in 24 states, and across those applicants, we, the agency, evaluated over 300 airspaces. And that's quite a task. And we looked at the safety behind those airspaces and if they had the possibility of eventually, helping us with civil integration. You've heard the term COA today, and why that's mentioned is we are having the test sites receive airspace COAs, certificates of authorization or waiver, and essentially what that means is they provide to us today a vehicle that they intend to fly and a description of that airspace and the time of day and whether or not they plan to have a chase aircraft behind that UAS and or whether it will be within line of sight. So 3 of the test sites to date have received test site COAs. When you heard the test sites talk today, they talked about their assets and attributes. A lot of those attributes are not necessarily just test site attributes that they were talking about. They were talking about attributes that they share within their state or across their team membership. And so 3 test sites have been granted special certificates of authorization and waiver. And I'm going to talk about those in a moment, although they've been talked about. Furthermore, you've heard everyone discuss collaboration. And, that's a nice buzzword. But to be frank, we are heading down that path. Right after the test sites were selected, at the William J. Hughes Technical Center in Atlantic City, we hosted 100 attendees. And the FAA was the host, and we had all the test sites present at that time who talked about the research acumen so we could hear
what the others were studying, and be able to work in a collaborative environment so that we weren't repeating the same research. Within the 100 attendees, what's noteworthy is that actually the TIM, the Technical Interchange meeting, was kicked off by the head of the Aviation subcommittee. So not only are we across the states with a lot of interest, but we also have a lot of interest on the Hill with the 6 test sites. So ahead of schedule, we put a stake in the sand, and so did the FMRA, that 6 months after we selected these test sites, we must have 1 test site stood up and operational. And 2.5 months ahead of schedule, we had the administrator, who already was in Nevada, or North Dakota at that time, declare that North Dakota, in fact, was operational. A few weeks later, the administrator happened to be in Alaska, and while he was there, he declared Alaska to be operational, the 2nd test site, and that same day, both North Dakota and Alaska conducted operations. On June 9th, Nevada was declared operational, and so we have 3 test sites left to become operational under test site COAs, and all 3 that are not yet operational have test site COAs in process. The agency's working with these test sites on seeing the possibility of the airspace in the vehicles that they have submitted to us for operation. So where are we headed? So I have to tell you, the test sites, in compared to getting a regular COA, the work is more arduous. We clearly have the test sites doing more than anybody else would have to do. And what will come with that, the hope is that we will grant them more freedom and or latitude, in that the test sites are working with us to show us their safety acumen, as you just defined, an excellent job, and we will watch some of the trials of their operations. So ultimately, the hope is that they, in fact, will be able to help the agency on issuing experimentals. That's on the civil side. And on the public side, as well as on the civil side, our hope is that eventually, instead of having COAs that are airspace and airframe centric, we will be able to provide the test sites the ability to provide them airspace, that they in fact will notify us which airframes or vehicles will be conducting operations. That's not to say that the agency is handing over airspace. We still will own airspace and retain all authority in the airspace. What it will mean, though, is that the test sites ultimately will not have to apply airframe by airframe to conduct operations, and that's a big transition. That really will help us with civil integration. Under the FMRA, FAA Modernization and Reform Act, there was a suspense date. 5 years after enactment of the law, we actually are deemed to shut down these test sites. And furthermore, a few months later, we owe a report out, we the agency, on conclusions and findings of what we found at the test sites as far as civil integration and the research that they've explored. The nice part about the test sites, and I have to give accolades here, is that they really are coming together, and we're talking about what types of research we can explore. It's not a competitive nature, and with that, we're meeting every 6 months formally, as well as talking bi-weekly every other week, not twice a week, and discussing where we're heading with this. So that type of environment has been pervasive, and it really, I think, will help us towards civil integration. And that's how I'd like to close my comments for the day. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, great. Okay, so let me start off with a couple things. I think, let me emphasize the last part that you talked about, Elizabeth, is the point that you now have 6 teammates potentially becoming part of the process of opening the doors for civil and public utilization of their systems, and being able to develop that trusted relationship with all these folks to be able to do that in a way that fits within all of FAA's responsibilities, I think, is a great expansion, and I think we're looking forward to that. One other one I'll start off with that everybody is pretty much involved with is in the past couple of years I've seen a number of curriculum within universities begin to focus on teaching unmanned systems, either from an engineering perspective or technical training. And all of you have university components or based at universities. Are you in some way also involved now with the curriculum, or is that sort of something that goes on and then when they get off in the research engagements, then they come to you to look for activities, or are they talking to some other entity that owns the vehicle and then the pair of them coming in to look at working in your airspace? Anyone?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of synergy now going back and forth at Virginia Tech. You know, for most of the universities, the airspace integration piece came sort of after research had started. So there's many pockets of research that are going on within the university. Now it's more of a two-way street. I think that the involvement with the test areas for us, which is Virginia Tech being the lead, and we have University of Maryland and Rutgers University as the leads, but we have other universities, is it's now not only the universities coming to fly, but industry coming to do research to fly. So there's much more of a partnering I see going on now than has been in the past, and opportunities in both directions. I come from a much different perspective than a lot of my colleagues, as I come from the commercial side. So I'm now trying to learn how to operate in the university setting, as opposed to my colleagues who come from the university side, trying to learn how to work in the commercial settings. But I think integration in the NAS, it's key that we all figure out those pieces, making it viable to do this research, integration research or repeatable research that gives us that access, along with you know, dealing with the university challenges of contracting. So making it affordable and making it accessible is very important. And that will continue to go back and forth, I think, and enhance the relationships from both sides.
You know, the University of North Dakota has an undergraduate degree program in unmanned aircraft systems, and the focus of that program is we say that we're preparing our graduates to bridge the gap between the engineer and the pilot. You know, both those professions have the unique language, and we're just trying to create a graduate that can talk, you know, multilingual, if you would. Our graduates are all commercial pilots, either in airplanes or helicopters. Our graduates are going to work for people that build these and operate unmanned aircraft systems. One of the most recent graduates, he came to the office looking for a lead on a job, and he ended up getting hired by the University of Minnesota to operate unmanned aircraft, doing a biology project. So, you know, we have. We started off in 2009 with five young men and women. Now we're up to 134 students in the program. Kids are interested and excited about unmanned aircraft systems. When I learned how to fly, I wanted to drive airplanes around the sky and get in the cockpit and things like that. All these young kids now are interested in the technology. They just embrace it. You know, it's amazing to see the energy that you have in these young men and women in the program. So I hope to answer your question. You know, we're creating young men and women for the job market. Luis, you talked about it. You know, STEM education. You know, creating an environment where young people want to be, and I think that's what we're doing. Not only with the University of North Dakota, but Embry-Riddle and other places as well.
Ro?
Yeah, we came at it. In our history, we started back in 2001 with unmanned aircraft, looking at it from the perspective of supporting scientists with a new way of collecting data. And the way it's evolved over time, we now have a partnership with the School of Engineering, or it's actually the College of Engineering and Mining at our school. And they are beginning to teach classes at the senior and graduate level in engineering, design of not only the unmanned aircraft themselves, but the sensors, which turn out to be critical for a lot of the scientists that are out there. And so, and we've hired some of those graduates right back into our program, and they're part of our process now. On the other end, way on the other end of that, is the A&P program, and we're not the only ones by any means to be starting that, but to begin to figure out how do we provide to the industry graduates who are capable of dealing with the special characteristics of the unmanned vehicle operating up there and the command and control links that are a part of that and the ground stations that are part of that. And we're all doing this without having the certification standards that are typical for manned aviation. So it's very much an exploratory arena right now in the A&P world.
So from the point of view of New York and Massachusetts, you would think that we would have less connection, direct connection to universities than the test sites. 3 of them are actually universities. 2 are states. North Dakota, of course, is directly connected to University of North Dakota and North Dakota State and others. My friend and colleague Tom Wilczek, who works out of the Governor Brian Sandoval's office in Nevada, also has very direct connections to University of Nevada, Reno and University of Nevada, Las Vegas, of which the last I have to say I'm a proud graduate of. But we have about 25 academic members in New York and Massachusetts, headed up by Rochester Institute of Technology. The New York institutions include Cornell, Syracuse University, Clarkson University in particular. In Massachusetts, of course, there's MIT, University of Massachusetts, and across the states, a number of community colleges, because we also are very strong advocates of the A&P programs in developing a UAS option, because clearly pilots, operators, maintainers, support staff, and don't forget that UAS integration into the NAS, civil airspace, really involves integration into next-gen. So we see opportunities as we start off with STEM education, go through the colleges and universities, opportunities to introduce air traffic management into the syllabuses or syllabi along with UAS. I think UAS can be a very strong forcing function to help educate our youth. Kitty Hawk moment, new Kitty Hawk moment, I agree. For me, it was the Sputnik moment and I fully foresee that as we start to integrate, as we start to develop our momentum, that we're going to have a UAS moment. And I think that the example I use in talking with people is the example that my colleague, Dr. Luis Cifuentes, talks about in terms of high school seniors coming to their campus and the excitement that there is just because Texas A&M Corpus Christi has been designated as one of the 6 test sites.
Just wanted to comment that as test sites, we are expected to do outreach. And certainly in the state of Texas, there are some hearts and minds that definitely need to be changed. And our strategy has been from the very beginning that much of the outreach is going to be through the educational side, starting with the young folks. So this STEM focus is very much a part of our overall outreach philosophy.
All right, thanks. Let me encourage the audience to start thinking about some questions and coming up, and I'm going to do one more. You can go ahead and get up to the mic. We talked this morning about all sorts of some of the crazy ideas that have been out there, from delivering 6-packs out on the frozen lake to Amazon delivering packages. I know there's been some aggressive pursuits by Google as well, and I know one of my passions has been high altitude use of UAVs for a lot of different purposes. A couple of you have talked about having high altitude capabilities within your ranges. Has Google come to visit any one of you yet?
Well, I think that's a loaded question, right? So,
Okay.
you know.
One of the things you have to consider is that in the world of industry, and you know it best, there's a lot of competition, and when a client starts to work with any one of us, I assume that they're looking for a non-disclosure agreement, and part of that is keeping the relationship quiet until they're ready to publicize, and it's their decision at that point.
Amazing.
Certainly, I think that many of the industries like Google and Amazon are very large, so I could see them partnering with more than one person. And like Rose said, we are competitors to an extent as well, because we all have very limited funding, and each of our states that have supported us are doing it through economic development, so they're looking for a return on their investment. And industry for years has also invested. So, you know, we are very excited to be at this point where we can start seeing some of that come to fruition.
Okay, great. Stay tuned. Please.
Is it on?
Go ahead.
My name is Nick Alley. I'm CEO of Aviation Incorporated here in the Metro Atlanta area. We're a small company, 11 employees. We develop UAV-related technologies and airframes. And I have, it's actually a three-part question. So I'll start with the first part. How is this supposed to benefit me, my company, my employees?
Well, I can start. You know, one of the important things here is integration research. So one way that this can help you and your employees is to provide a place where we can gather data from your platforms to not only train your employees with the commercial market on the horizon, but also look at applications that we capture research from the FAA with. So you're able to come and fly in a location where we're able to capture important data to open up the industry, but we're also very conscientious about making it affordable and accessible. I have run 2 small companies in my life and have mortgaged the house to pay payroll, so I understand those challenges. And I believe all of us feel that, you know, that small market with a small rule on the horizon is one of those areas that are going to open up sooner than later.
So we have a handful of test beds. We have from 12-pound hand-launched aircraft to a 200-pound jet-powered asset that we use to provide flight research for NASA. So going with that 200-pound asset, we typically operate at a Class D airspace, 100-foot wide runway, need typically at least 3,000 feet of operation. Which of the test sites would you recommend that I go to?
All of us have those assets, so. Yeah.
Here I am in Georgia, small company, understand, 11 employees, and my standpoint as a small business owner. I'm looking at this as how is this benefiting the struggle of the small business owner? So which test site?
I guess, yeah, so would something close, like one of your partners is GTRI, I don't remember which, is that an access point, or should they just start sending you all emails? Go ahead, Al.
I'll start with emails, but you know, we got a saying in North Dakota that if you got dollars worth of research, you can do it for 50 cents in North Dakota.
Except where the oil companies are.
Yeah, we got a little bit of oil there. But having said that, the state of North Dakota put up $12 million for research, $6 million to each one of the research universities for UAS type research. You know, contact all of us because, you know, we're trying to figure out, you know, you're a customer and we are kind of like your vendors type thing, so ping all of us.
Down to the bottom line then. 200-pound asset. We bring all of our own flight test facilities, a trained crew, significant amount of experience, and all the spectrum analysis, everything you need. How much will it cost me to operate for a week at your sites?
Yeah, I think that's an answer for each of you to individually address.
I don't think anyone's probably prepared to do that.
Well, I think this is something that needs to be said. I mean, is this like healthcare? We find out when it comes out?
No, I don't think it's like healthcare, but you know, we are still a burgeoning industry as well with the test sites. So depending on what the economic model is at each site, some sites have more to offer than others regarding whatever research is going to back up and help you enable that.
Is there a rough order of magnitude for the education of the company?
Well, I think a rough order of magnitude, I have taken commercial products to aerospace where I've had to go to restricted airspace, and I've had to pay $40,000 to $50,000 a day to open up the airspace to do that.
Oh yeah, we've had $10,000 a day.
Right. So we are looking to for sure make it much better than that. You know, we're looking to be able to open up the airspace, but we're also working through the COA process with the FAA. And you know, right now many states are subsidizing some of those activities.
Sure.
So we can't give you a per week. We can't charge for airspace access. So you know, we're working out our cost models, but you know, many of us have things in place now to do that. So
does anybody have a ballpark that
You're not going to get a
I'm not
number
gonna hold
from
it to
us.
you,
You're not going to get a number because we don't know specifically what services you need. We don't know how many hours it's going to take to prepare your COA application. And that's all about labor.
I have 2 COAs already.
It doesn't matter. I still don't know what it's going to take to make it acceptable in a test site, in our test site, okay, or in any of the test sites. They're very specific. You know, you need to understand what specific services. It's not a cost per day. It's a cost as tailored and as lean as we can possibly make it. That covers.
And Ro, I get your frustration with my question. And the point is the frustration as a small business owner of turning that around and operating on a small budget and trying to understand us trying to access the airspace in a responsible and legal manner.
And we really share that because we're not getting funded to do it either, right?
Yeah.
So we have economic development money, and we're, you know, we've got grants and those things we're putting into place. So we feel your pain, and we are working very hard to make it not only affordable but sustainable. Because the good news is we're having these conversations. Where 2 years ago we would have been stuck in the restricted airspace, right? So or we would be looking for something else.
Elizabeth, did you want to round out this?
I did. I just wanted to say that, you know, you're very accustomed, perhaps, of going to DOD and or NASA to utilizing their airspace, and the test sites were not stood up to be similar to DOD and NASA, where you come and potentially and pay for access to the airspace. They're set up towards helping further civil integration, and we, the agency, are not paying them. So it's a completely different model than everything you've dealt with or that they've dealt with before. If they're acting as on behalf of a public aircraft operator, they're not allowed to charge you for airspace access, and they must either own the aircraft or vehicle, and they must operate that vehicle. So the paradigm that I hear you asking them to price is something they legally couldn't price acting as a public aircraft operator.
So they have to operate my vehicle then?
If they were acting as a public aircraft operator. If they plan to work with you on achieving an experimental, that's a different paradigm. And we're working through these processes that are different, that have never been done before, with more latitude for the test sites. But if you are trying to compare this civil access similar to what you do with military, there's not a one-to-one comparison.
We can't afford to work with the military. We've been fortunate enough to get, we have 4 COAs that have been sponsored through public entities in the state of Georgia, which is really rare. That it's been a huge blessing for our company to be able to do that. But I know that other companies haven't had the support from the state like we have. And so we operate our aircraft off of COAs. We lease the aircraft to those public entities, and they conduct those tests. And so
when we selected the test sites, we made sure that they were public entities so they would be agnostic to the users who may want to come in and reap the benefits of the research. So that hopefully would help a small business as well as a large business, because I would imagine that most of the test sites had, during their bid and proposal timeframe, larger vendors supporting them. But we chose public entities for that agnostic solution. So that should help you with being able to work with them on where you want to head.
I think any one of us would be willing to talk to you one-on-one to get more specific. But
I look forward to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Good
afternoon. I'm Will Fluke from the Boeing Company. Had kind of two quick questions for you. One related to capacity. I'd be interested in any comments from you guys as far as, if there's 8 test sites in Alaska, do you anticipate having the bandwidth so that, a half dozen people can be out there testing at once in different locations, or are we going to be more single-threaded than that? As well as I'm hoping that either Mr. Fuentes or someone else can expand on the efforts that you're taking to ensure some commonality with regards to paperwork, operational procedures, data types, and that kind of thing.
Well, I'd like to answer the airspace. As I had stated before, we received across the application pool over 300 airspaces for consideration across the 25 applicants. Across the 6 selected, they are allowed to add airspaces to their portfolio. They may actually have an airspace today that later, a year or so from now, may not meet their needs. Mm-hmm. They also do not have to have contiguous airspace. So I think you saw Oregon and Hawaii and Alaska, and you saw corridors. That does not necessarily mean that they're flying the aircraft from Alaska to Hawaii in that connected diagram you saw. So we are anticipating that the test sites will add to their portfolio of airspaces. Again, it doesn't need to be contiguous. They also have the possibility, if it meets their business needs, to go to other states and look at conducting operations not only in the states that are their team members for airspace, but other states in addition.
So I think another part of your question was whether we have enough bandwidth. And I think there's a combination of demand, right, and supply. And I think that each test site is willing and their business model will support growth as the industry grows. We have budgets like you do, or like many of the small companies do, and we will grow airspaces and launch and recovery sites. I think there's some misunderstanding about a test site. Many people question what a test site is, and it's actually, in my case, it's Virginia, New Jersey, and Maryland, but there are launch and recovery sites underneath there, as Roe and the others have shown. So as the demand grows, we can build more infrastructure and handle that capacity issue.
Yeah, and I would also say some of our ranges will be manned all the time. Some of them will be completely unpopulated. There won't be anyone there at all unless we have a specific reason to go to that location. And so my expectation is the ones that are manned now, we will have a larger number that are manned as time goes on and as the demand supports. But for now, it's a matter of how much we can afford to do that with. I think that the amount of bandwidth we're all going to end up with has a lot to do with you all. If you've got work you want to do, then we're going to find the capability to support that work.
Yeah, it'd be nice if the bandwidth was, you had to deal with multiple operations on a day-to-day basis. Well, 1 second, Ray.
We do that
Luis,
now.
You had a comment?
The way we're structured is to have all of the range activities. So there are 11 ranges in our test site being operated through a central mission control center. And at this point, it's set up so that it can only really manage one operation at a time, but the ultimate goal is to have at least 8 operations being able to run at the same time at 8 different ranges. I don't know that we'll ever get to the point where that many people want to be utilizing the ranges on a daily basis.
We're hopeful, though.
But if it does, that's what we've planned for. And to answer your second question about where we're moving in terms of commonality and working together, as Elizabeth said, we have these TIM meetings where we bring everybody together. And the last time we got together, we're asking about what are some of the key things that we want to do. We all agreed that we have to share best practices the next time we meet, which is, when is it?
September 23rd and 24th.
And so that's when a lot of us are going to start talking about some of the things that we've been doing and recognizing the need to have some uniformity so that we don't have 8 different ways of doing or 6 different ways of doing things.
Just reinforcing that point, we're very much in transition here, and so is the FAA. The approach so far to COA process has been piecemeal in the FAA. It's one COA at a time, basically. The FAA has devoted enormous amount of resources to standing up the test sites. June 28th will be the 180th day since the selection was announced. Remember, the Congress set this up as a 5-year program, so we're only 10% into the originally envisioned 5 years. The moving from a process of single approvals requiring 60 business days for COA approval within the FAA to a streamlined process, which we understand the FAA is moving as rapidly as they can. By providing, once the test sites demonstrate their capability, as Elizabeth Soltys said, there will be a streamlined process, and this is going to relieve the FAA of many of the resources that it's been committing up to now. So that's basically where we're going. I think it will be a much more efficient process. It means that the users of the test sites will be able to get, whatever test site they go to, will be able to get a much more responsive, rapid, will be very much customer responsive.
Okay, thanks, Ray.
I'd say it's already
Steve?
happening, actually, because we're getting COAs in about 6 weeks.
Great, thank you. Steve Justice with the Center of Innovation for the State of Georgia, Aerospace. Elizabeth had the most interesting thing to me up on the screen about when we started talking about airworthiness certificates and experimental certificates. I'm a former DER, so I'm used to the manned aircraft allegory where we have an experimental ticket, where we have that ticket, and we don't have designated test sites. We have some airspace in the national airspace. We fly off our experimental ticket, and then at some point we do that and we get our full aircraft type certificate. So in the comments that you made, I wasn't clear as to what kind of authority you were looking at the test sites having in terms of, was that simply the experimental tickets on kind of a DER, a designated engineering representative kind of basis, or an ODR kind of organizational basis? And if you had an experimental ticket, would you be only able to fly in the test sites, or would it be still more like the manned allegory, where if you're a company like NICS and you get an experimental ticket for your vehicle, you can fly in the national airspace as designated by that experimental ticket? That's a big question, so.
No, okay, so let me make sure I have this correctly. Today, you know that the agency does issue experimentals, correct?
For
Yes.
UAS.
For UAS.
Well, for manned aircraft as well.
Correct. Thank you. So what we are working on with the test sites right now is that they would have designated airworthiness representatives that would help with the process of issuing experimentals solely for the test sites, and that is because this is exploratory in nature. So initially the agency is working on this process for the test sites. Furthermore, we're working with the test sites. We recently were at your facility reviewing the thousands of pages that you've paid for to see where our test sites are as far as their safety acumen. Is it repeatable? Is it CMMI? The processes that you would see behind CMMI, do they have that type of relationship with their processes for flight, so that in the next, I'm not putting a stake in sand, but let's just say it were in the next year, if they've received a few test site COAs and we've seen them exercise their processes and we know that they're repeatable and that they've embraced those processes, can we now look at one of their test site COA airspaces and afford them the opportunity as a public entity to start conducting operations in that airspace with airframes that they let us know about versus us approving those airframes.
What I didn't hear there is that will entities, commercial entities that are not affiliated with test sites, still be able to go and get experimental tickets?
Yes, they will.
All right, that's good.
And I think an important point with the experimental manned versus unmanned is when you get an unmanned experimental, which I did one of the first with the Shadow in 2007, it comes with a lot of operational restrictions that an experimental GA aircraft doesn't come with. So you just can't go off and fly. So I happened to get my experimental in Benson, Arizona. But it was very, very specific, and it actually had COA-like restrictions attached to it, unlike my experimental RV, to go out and fly that. So it's a bit of a different character than a manned experimental.
Okay. Time for a couple more. Yeah?
Hi, thank you for being here. My question is more on the academia side, you know, as opposed to what we've heard from the business perspective. I'm actually a new professor at UT San Antonio, and I'm doing some research in UAS. I have some unique vehicle that I would like to test. And so I guess for Luis, since we have the Texas A&M and Corpus Christi test site, I was wondering what kind of mechanisms there would be for a new faculty to be able to test their designs or new applications.
Our perspective is that you as a faculty member are going to develop your given research plan. And at some point, that research plan may require utilizing a test site. Where we can help you, and we're already set up to work with faculty members, and by the way, do you know Daniel Peck? I assume you do. Yeah, he's the point of contact for UT San Antonio for this project. We have an individual whose sole job it is to work as a research development person and provide assistance for faculty members, not just at Corpus Christi, but anybody who's interested to generate a proposal to do your research. And what you're going to need to be able to generate that proposal is information about how to use the test site. You may want some assistance with getting FAA approvals for X, Y, and Z. You are going to want to know what it costs so you can include it into the proposal for the different services that you require. That's the kind of assistance that we can provide you as a test site.
Okay. And so would I need to bring in my own funding as well?
No. The idea is that your funding stays with you, but when you use the test sites, there's certain services you would be provided for which we need to recover costs, and that would be included in your budget.
Okay.
So I know at Virginia Tech, we want to provide a service for you to get your research, for our faculty to get research done without having to worry about all the other pieces of it that are the COA pieces, but then we also get to leverage the integration piece as well, right? So you have your concept, whether it's an air vehicle concept or a sensor concept or whatever your concept is, but then you would come with that concept, and with, as Louise had said, that we would tell you what a fee is, and we're keeping it very reasonable for universities, we would be able to do all that paperwork so that you can concentrate on the research. I have faculty constantly telling me that what a pain in the neck it is to do all the paperwork, and they don't have to, they don't want to do the report backs and all of that stuff. So those are the pieces that in our site, and I believe some of the others that we see, we provide so that more research can get done quicker for you, and we're more efficient in doing the other pieces of it. And then we gain the national airspace research that wouldn't normally be captured in a university COA.
Oh, I see. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, Dr. Pierce.
Bob Pierce, NASA. I want to ask more of a top-down question. So there's currently a lot of activity going on to figure out a roadmap for general access to the airspace, and the FAA is doing a lot of work there. And Elizabeth, you mentioned, so at the end of this program, there's going to be a report in 5 years on here's what this, what this group of test sites did, accomplish, and so forth. Do you know today, any sense today of how that, the content of that report is going to have contributed to the roadmaps, the roadmap that's being developed? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
For the JPDO? I'm sorry, for the JPDOs?
No.
Old road, the road you produced?
Well, the FAA, the national roadmap.
So today we have a stake in the sand that we have a report out to Congress as a milestone, but as a contributor to say we've relieved this much airspace and it's now available for use or anything of that nature. We don't have that stake in the sand. We have research elements listed that would be complete. Is that what you're looking for?
I just think it'd be interesting for the team to, as you're collaborating in your meeting, to think about those needs and requirements that are coming out of that process, and to see how what you're doing, the research and so forth, could contribute to that, where the gaps are, where you're both best suited to contribute and so forth.
Okay, so let me further what we've done. We've just actually this week provided to the test sites a literature search of what NASA, FAA, and DoD have been undertaking with research. We've also given them the labels of that research that we've conducted across 3 agencies. With that, we told them there was no prioritization, although the test sites are cognizant of the 6 focal areas the agency needs to conquer in order to obtain civil integration. So, and let me emphasize, civil integration does not mean all airspaces, all vehicles. So we just did that, and not only did we provide it to the test sites, but we also posted it publicly on the FAA UAS website. We plan to, now that we've gone through this process, we know there's linkages with this research in the green lanes to the roadmap. We plan to work again with another release of that and offer that to the test sites. The test sites will then, as they're starting to build their research and let us know about it, we can then move that into the linkages across the green lanes into the agency with the connectivity to the, you know, to the different roadmaps, whether they be airframe roadmaps or ATM, et cetera. We're clearly not there. We're starting to do this dialogue and sharing.
And I would add that the NASA UAS integration into the NAS program is an important element of this under your Integrated Systems Research Program, which will end, as it stands now, I understand, on September 30th, 2016, which is before the test site program ends. We're also very encouraged that NASA has reached out to us, assigned people to come visit us over the next month or two, so we can integrate our planning with yours. And for us, particularly in New York, we're very interested in the leave behinds and some of the work that you are planning on doing as part of the RTCA SC228 UAS Standards Committee work on verification and validation of detect and avoid and command and control. I think that's going to be a great help to us if we can kind of converge where you end up and where we take it from there. Because I think if you polled us on the test sites, we don't see any reason, given the investment made by the FAA and by our states and universities, our test site operators, we don't see any reason why this program should end on February 13th, 2017.
Well, we certainly think we're doing great work too, so thank you.
Okay.
But I do think, I just applaud, you know, getting all of us, you know, on one, to the best we can. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, on one sort of, you know, one kind of general plan.
Certainly there's enough work to go around for all of us, and we don't need to repeat each other, right? There's plenty to go around.
Okay, so sum that up, I think there's no monolithic path here to something that benefits all mankind. We're getting started. We're defining all the roles and how we operate. I do have one last closing question, and kind of tugs at some of the things that have come across here. So what? What does it matter to someone whether they come through one of your test sites or not? Does the struggle on their own? Is that an option?
I guess I'll start, and I'm sure others can chime in as we go. The first thing is, for their own benefit, we're going to have, as Elizabeth has already said, we're going to have more freedom, more latitude, more ability to offer broader flight capability for those who want to come to us. And that gets you further down the path of gaining knowledge about your systems. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because ultimately this is going to result in type standards, and the information we get about your systems is going to help inform what those standards turn out to be. And if the standards are more like reality, it's going to be a much smoother path for everyone than if they are built more on speculation than reality, if you will. So there's a very direct aspect, in my opinion, right there. The other aspect is the experimental path that we've talked about a little bit, and that ultimately is also helping with the standards. That's how you get to standards anyway, but it's also giving that opportunity to begin to, honestly, you're competing out there, right, with each other for the people who want to buy systems. To be able to say that your system has been tested at a test site and it's made it through the following tests that the FAA has requested that the test site do, and it's contributed to the knowledge base that's out there. And we haven't talked about Arctic Aerospace, but that's another component of FMRA where you can get to commercial capability. Each of those things begins to make you a more competitive producer.
I think the other part is that direct linkage that we have as test sites with working with the FAA and accepting the data and accepting the processes and procedures. If you go out and fly on today's COAs, there's a bit of that you do through the COA process, but you don't get that added benefit of feeding the commercial analysis and feeding, moving the industry and helping the FAA inform those standards and work with RTCA and ASTM and whoever is actually out there doing the standards work. So you're actually enabling the industry to move. You may get a COA today, or you may have COAs today, whether you're in the university or through the states, and that's helping a mission set today, but it's not moving that commercial market as quickly as it will be able to through test sites.
Mm-hmm. One last one.
You said it yourself, equivalent confidence of level of safety. And we are being required to conduct our operations under very specific regulations.
So instead of one doorway, going back to Washington, talking to FAA, there are now 6 other doorways to go through. A lot of opportunity to get your system worked. Okay, with that, I'd like to first thank the panel and Elizabeth from FAA for being here. I want to thank the audience for participating, but AIAA does have a token of appreciation for your participation in this, a coin.
Thank you. Those of us who collect coins.
I think that and $1 will get you a drink in the bar. Thank you.
This is worth less than $25, right?
Yes, this is less than $25, Elizabeth. Okay, thank you all for participating.